Hello, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening to all of you. My name is Asad Naqvi. I am acting head of the PAGE Secretariat. I hope you are able to hear me quite well. So, welcome to this series of webinar on PAGE. We will be discussing the PAGE theory of change. And I'm highly delighted and distinguished to see that we have 27 participants with us now. There are a few things that I think are important to mention before we start getting into the substance. As rules for the webinar, we are requesting that you keep your mute button on all the time so that minimizes the disturbance and distractions. Number two, when you have questions or any queries, you can write it in the chat box. I'm here with Ronald as well as Jamal, who will be compiling the questions together, and then we will pose them to the speakers. Also, at the same time, if there are any unanswered questions today, these will be answered through email to you. Number three, I'm pleased to see that some of you are connected with video connection, and that's great to see the faces. In case the computer or the line gets overburdened with data transfers, we may have to switch it to the audio connection. After this, so just to introduce myself, as I mentioned, my name is Asad Naqvi. I'm the acting head of the PAGE Secretariat based in Geneva. I've had the pleasure of meeting many of you in person and to many others through email and electronic communication. What is PAGE? All of you and many of you possibly already know, it's a partnership of 5 United Nations agencies: United Nations Environment Program, International Labor Organizations, United Nations Development Program, United Nations Industrial Development Organization, and United Nations Institute for Training and Research, coming together to support countries on greening of national economies. Today's discussion is focused on what are we trying to achieve, how we get there, and possibly what are the different examples that we can see in terms of the theory of change. I'm thankful to Jamal as well as Ronald for sharing with you the theory of change text, which comes from the operational strategy. You will have today 4 speakers. Joining us are Emre from UNITAR, Johannes from UNIDO, who is head of the office for the Indian region, Najma Muhammad, who is PAGE coordinator in South Africa, as well as Jose, who is an international expert on measuring progress and the brain behind Green Economy Progress Index. So before we start, so we will be starting with the text, which is, what are we trying to achieve? What is our theory of change in PAGE? And where we are trying to get. So our final destination is that countries are reframing economic policies around sustainability. And that in itself is a huge task. And then we have tried to put it into bite-sized pieces, which is, number 1, it requires enabling policy conditions. Number 2, it requires reforms in incentive systems and structures. It needs successful business models, as well as having investments coming behind the policy changes, technological needs, as well as building human and social capital. At the second level, the impact we are trying to create is that countries are transforming their economies to eradicate poverty, increase job and social equity, while strengthening livelihoods and environmental stewardship. So to create these 2 impacts, then we will go at a third level in the theory of change, which is about the outcomes. And that's where we will be discussing today, that how do we use our outcomes to create this impact, And then what do we need to do once we have the impact to lead to our outcomes? So first of all, we will start with our outcome 1 level discussion, which is that countries have reinforced and integrated inclusive green economy goals and targets into SDG-aligned economic and development planning through multi-stakeholder collaboration. The key words here that I see are number 1, integration of IGE in targets and goals of national economic policy, as well as multi-stakeholder collaboration. To present this as a real-life example, I would like to invite Emre, who is leading the coordination of work in Mongolia and has been providing the support to see that how, to see how we can achieve this outcome, which then leads to the impact as well as the overall result. Okay, I have been told that instead of Emre, it will be Alta who will be presenting this. She has about 5 minutes to see how the country is reinforcing and integrating inclusive green economy goals into SDG-aligned economic development planning. Alta, over to you.
Thank you, Asad. And my name is Alta. I am the National Coordinator of PAGE in Mongolia. So I will make a very brief introduction about Mongolia's case on green development policy and PAGE support for the implementation of the green development policy. Just to say a few words about the long-term policy documents which have been approved recently in Mongolia. So Mongolia is the first country to join PAGE, and following this important step, Mongolian Parliament adopted a green development policy in 2014. And then since the adoption of the green development policy, the Mongolian government and the Mongolian people also have made a lot of efforts to ensure that the Green Development Action Plan was approved by the government of Mongolia. And after 2 years of period in 2016, the cabinet approved the action plan for implementation of the Green Development Policy, and it elaborates 255 activities. I should highlight that in that action plan, a number of PAGE initiatives had been incorporated, including the green development indicators, green jobs, sustainable public procurement, green economy learning, financing, and green building. And then in February 2016, the Mongolian Parliament also approved another very important document, which is the Sustainable Development Vision of Mongolia. So what PAGE has done for Mongolia to support all these important policy documents? First of all, I should say that the PAGE enabled policy dialogue among the government and as well as different stakeholders, including international development organizations, private sector, as well as civil society organizations and academia. And just highlights of 2016 were two very high-level events. One is Mobilizing Partnership for Green Development, which was held in March 2016 with the previous government, and the other one was very recent event, Sustainable Development from Planning to Implementation, which was held in November 2016 with the new government. And PAGE, to help the government of Mongolia mainstream its national and global commitments, also support the activity and service to carry out mapping of the Green Development Policy and National Sustainable Development Vision 2030 against the Global Agenda for Sustainable Development 2013. I should say that the study actually showed very good coherence between their global SDGs and national policy documents. And And another PAGE support for Mongolia was actually technical assistance to the National Statistics Office of Mongolia to develop framework of green development indicators, and also to carry out the pilot study on green jobs. In 2016, for the first 2 quarters, the National Statistics Office of Mongolia carried out green jobs survey by incorporating the model into the household-based labor force survey. And another important work which PAGE supported for Mongolia was the T21 model development, as well as green development policy assessment that actually showed very important positive impacts of the green investment in the green economy. Over to you, Amre. Amre, I hope you will continue.
Okay, so is Amrai taking over from here onward? Yeah, okay.
Yes, yeah. The last slide on Mongolia. Thank you.
Okay. It seems we are having some technical problems in connecting Amre.
Oh, really?
Amre, are you there? Okay. So while I think we are sorting out the technology issue with Amre, we will probably come back to outcome 1. We heard what is being done in Mongolia as an overall picture. I think Amre will bring it to the focus of how it is connected with outcome 1, which is creating the required impact and then leading it to the overall outcome. I think the whole idea is that all 4 outcomes should be mutually supportive and all leading to the overall impact as well as overall outcome. Moving on to the second level of outcome, which sees, so the first one is really at the macroeconomic level, looking at the broader landscape and trying to put IGE into the national planning processes and the economic policy reform, while the second outcome is more at the sectoral level, where we see that countries are implementing evidence-based sectoral and thematic reforms in line with national inclusive green economy priorities. And one of the best examples that we have seen in this regard was the work which was led by UNIDO on green industry. So I would like to invite Johannes to share with us that how they created certain outputs and what were the additional elements they added into the work to make sure that those outputs basically lead to the outcome level 2, which is implementing evidence-based sectoral and thematic reforms. So Johannes, over to you.
Okay, good morning or good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, very good. Well, thanks for inviting us to this interesting webinar. Our case is quite concrete, as you already said. It's within outcome of an effort to contribute to outcome 2, to lead to sectoral reforms. And what we did is we did an assessment, a green industry assessment for Peru to carve out the potentials that are in green industry in Peru. And that was using a methodology that for the Peruvian context is quite new, which is resource productivity. Based on our discussions with the counterparts, also with the academia, resource productivity as a concept had not been envisaged so far in Peru. So it was quite received with a lot of interest from government and from academia when we proposed it. The assessment basically identified 3 priority sectors with a lot of potentials for improved resource productivity. That was construction and cement, metal, and forest products. We had within this work was also the proposal to bring in the Ministry of Production and the whole administration that has to do with the productive sectors, bring it closer into PAGE, because so far Ministry of Industry had relatively limited interest in environmental issues. So this was an opportunity, and so we worked from the beginning very closely and tried to have a lead from the group. Now, during the work on the assessment, we did not work in isolation and present the final products. We had several rounds of feedback, sending out the draft documents, first results, discussing with PAGE partners and with counterparts. And we always tried to have the Ministry of Industry in the lead when we arranged for these consultations. We can skip to the next. Yes, thank you. So overall, we think the output was delivered with reasonably good quality. It was a good assessment with well evidence-based. Now, on our way to the outcome, how we contribute with this assessment, typically, I mean, we all know that a study is a study and it can go shelved and not lead to anything. So if you look at the theory of change of PAGE, you will also find that between output and outcome, there is a lot of assumption, which means it does not only depend on the output, of course, whether you reach the outcome. I think one of the basic assumptions in PAGE is that if you deliver an output, there will be a commitment from government to take it up, to take it as an evidence base for policy making. Now, this was in the case of Peru quite okay, but there was a serious challenge, because we delivered the output basically when the old government was on its way out. And change of government, as you all know, means that you have to start a bit fresh, and that was one of the problems we saw from the assumption side. Now, apart from assumptions, you also consider normally drivers, meaning factors that would facilitate achievement of outcome if they are given. Now, in a document that in the recent PAGE evaluation, these drivers are clearly stated in the reconstructed theory of change, and I put some of them here, and the first is ministerial coordination. Of course, if you only stick to one ministry, then the impact will be limited. Now, for this not to happen, there needs to be ministerial coordination within the country. We all know from our experience, sometimes this is more or less given. In Peru, it's not really working very well, I have to say. So this driver, I think, is not yet to a significant extent there. Although we have to say PAGE is making a contribution in itself to improve the ministerial coordination, because we have several ministries involved. Now, the business case not sufficiently evident. Of course, for the business case to be sufficiently evident for the reforms that we present, we need to have stronger evidence. We need to have, this study did not go far enough. So in order to support it, we need to go a step deeper to establish the business case in several elements, and we are doing that right now. In a month from now, we will have a forum, a private sector and public sector forum that will present clear business cases where you can make use of secondary resources, of industrial waste and similar, to establish the business case for green industry. Local expertise in this kind of methodology is a bit limited, which is also, of course, not helping. But we have to say one of the drivers that is a given, the assessment is well aligned with the policy for industrial diversification, which is the main industrial policy in Peru for the time being. So because it discovers new possibilities for industry. Next. So in terms of contributions, the assessment is being used to define sectoral reforms. My main client here is the Environmental Directorate of the Ministry of Industry. They are taking the methodology up and they are doing their own analysis using it. Of course, the assessment helps us to discuss, to take up the discussions with the new government, especially the new government was very skeptical about any significant role of the forestry sector. The study helps a little bit to get this discussion in a new direction, not the traditional role of the forestry sector, but a more value-added role. Now, the resource productivity method is being recognized as a tool for evidence-based policy making. But overall, I would say it is not yet possible to assess contributions to impact. I think to outcome, it is quite visible, but to impact, this is a punctual activity and too limited for singling out a contribution yet. But we are following up, and we need a continuous process to influence policy beyond change of government even. Yeah. So I think the PAGE needs to be, we need to have a longer breath in order to see impact materialize. But this was an important first step, as I say in the presentation. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, very much. I think it's very real life story of how things could be made from an output to an impact, or at least an outcome. Number one, I think you mentioned that, you know, it's the quality of the report that makes a big difference. I think that's an important message. Government leadership is important in translating a product into an outcome. And you mentioned the example of keeping the Ministry of Industry and Production in the lead. Several rounds of feedback, which is bringing everyone on board and taking their concerns and their input into account, that will help to translate an output into an outcome. Commitment from the government, and as you mentioned, I think PAGE has been in many ways leading this type of commitment from the government, you know, requiring that more than 2 ministries sign even the application form, and then there is an interministerial committee at the government level. I think that's an encouraging contribution from PAGE to an integrated development pathway at the national level. And then, of course, the policy alignment, that our products are aligned with the policy. So if this green industry assessment was aligned with diversification strategy, it makes it much more easier for an output to become an outcome, and then possibly leading to an impact. As Johannes mentioned, I think it's an important message that, yes, there is still a step before we can say that we are creating the overall impact. And I think today's discussion will lead us into that direction, that how we can move from outcome to an impact level. As Amrai is back, so I would probably take a step back and go back to the outcome 1. So maybe you can present in 5 minutes how we can create some outputs and leading them into outcomes, but then creating the overall impact, which is very ambitious challenge that PAGE has taken on, which is transformation of the economy.
Okay, thank you. Maybe if you could just move to the... Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. This is Amrai Holspring from UNITAR. Just wanted to add a few thoughts or lessons learned to what Alta presented. And I think many of these lessons learned actually also speak to what the last speaker just talked about now, and what Assad pointed to. How do we really move from the activities and outputs to the outcome level? What's the experience of Mongolia? And I think one of the main points we learned was really, if we talk about outcome 1, the national development planning framework, the national green development policy is there in Mongolia, but we need to go a bit farther now. So it's good to have the policy in place, and I think that's for many countries the first big step. but then that needs to really trickle down also to national planning and budgeting processes. So how do we make sure, for example, that green investments are prioritized when sector ministries submit their budget proposals for the next year to the Ministry of Finance? That's one of the things I think that's definitely important for outcome one, but I think it's definitely the same for the sectoral level. Then a second point was around foundational learning. So I think to really enable an informed dialogue about, for example, green development policy or how to reframe national development planning around the SDGs and then specifically green economy, you need to have a common understanding of the core concepts. Because I think we have all been in meetings where you say green economy, but each of us has a different understanding of what that means, and that's maybe also fine. But I think the key kind of core measures that are being proposed now are important that there is a common understanding, because otherwise it will be difficult to get to any kind of meaningful discussion. Then we had also from the beginning an involvement of national institutions in the assessment work. So Alta mentioned that we did, for example, a T21 and a policy assessment in support of the green development policy, so to see what would be the kind of outcomes if, for example, 2% of GDP was invested in environmental sectors. And that was done from the beginning with a local research institute. And I think that was important in terms of sustainability. Again, the outcome one is not something that's being achieved just during the 4 years of the PAGE project, but it's something that needs to be carried forward also afterwards. And for that, it's important to build capacity within government. So for example, also people in the Ministry of Finance were trained on modeling, but it seems that these public policy research institutes or similar types of think tanks can play an important role. At least in the case of Mongolia, we have seen that, for example, there seems to be less staff turnover than in some of the government departments. So it seems a good investment in terms of sustainability to work with those institutions. And then just the last point, I mean, yeah, the partnerships with other development partners, development organizations. I think, again, that's one of the main contributions PAGE has provided under outcome one. I think not only in Mongolia, but if I think about South Africa, or also other countries, Ghana, now PAGE has been often really a project that managed to bring together the different partners, also from the development community, to discuss how to better organize ourselves to support the government priorities in the area of green economy or green development.
Thank you, Amre. So I think we heard a very good story on Mongolia, initially by Alta, who is the national PAGE coordinator, and she oversees what is happening on a daily basis, and then from Amre, who has the broader picture over this. I will just add probably 2 additional points, which Amre just said. One is, I think from the beginning, it's important to stay focused on capacity building, because PAGE has a sustainability plan. PAGE comes with a 4-year commitment to a country, and possibly during that time period, have the policy frameworks in place so that the work can continue, as well as leaving the capacity behind for the continuation of work. So as part of the sustainability strategy, it is important that when we are planning our PAGE activities, we have in mind the sustainability strategy, and then capacity building is very much part of that. And the second part, which Amre said, I think was important, is the partnerships. That PAGE is not working alone if we want to create the impact that we envision, which is transforming the economic policy processes. So in Mongolia, for example, PAGE is working very closely, not only with the individual agencies' initiatives like UNDP and others who are on ground, but also with Global Green Growth Institute, with Mongolian Banking Association, who is a partner of UNEP, FI, etc., and with Poverty and Environment Initiative in many countries and UN-WED. So just trying to bring everyone together. And that is probably an important element of in our theory of change, that it's not only that we are mobilizing the national stakeholders, multidisciplinary, but also the other initiatives. As the focus is on capacity building, I think it's a good time to move on to the outcome 3, which is institutional, individual, and planning capacities for inclusive green economy action are strengthened at national and global level. To give this example, I would like to invite Najma Mohammed, who is the PAGE coordinator for South Africa, and they have done some real good work on ground to build the capacity. So Najma, over to you.
Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Asad, for the introduction. I'm glad Amra has joined us because I hope she's going to pitch in at some stage of the presentation. So to give a bit of a background to this output, it really formed part of the inception phase of PAGE in South Africa. And in the South African vision and commitment towards transitioning to a greener economy, the notion of building the skills and capabilities to support this transition is very prominent in the policy framework. In particular, policies such as the Environmental Sector Skills Plan for the country, which actually highlights skills that can support a green economy transition, in the National Skills Development Strategy for the country, and then in the long-term development vision, the National Development Plan, that actually speaks about investment in skills to support this transition to a low-carbon economy. So to go to the Green Economy Learning Assessment, which was part of the inception activities. It's still very early stage to see what sort of impact we will have with this output. It's hot off the press. We hope to share this document in January. But it had three main objectives, really: to identify learning priorities for policy action, to review what capacities existed, and also to identify opportunities to upscale the development and delivery of green economy learning through national institutions. I think just building on the very important point that Amre made, even before we look at how this particular output in South Africa relates to the broader outcome of PAGE around building institutional capacity. I think we shouldn't underestimate the value of the process for building institutional capacity, the process of interacting nationally to bring institutions together, whether it's around national workshops or roundtables. For this particular activity, I found that was quite an enriching process, because you had a national service provider that actually brought together learning institutions in the country, brought government departments working on skills development and the green economy together. And that was a very useful conversation to have. So if we could move on to the next slide, please. So on the next slide, really, so during the course of the assessment, as I mentioned, national learning institutions participated actively in the development of the methodology for the assessment, and also in fine-tuning the recommendations emerging from the assessment. So we are now at the stage where these recommendations have been delivered to the National Steering Committee. It's influenced and shaped the PAGE work plan for the next 3 years. And I think before I go into the how the particular recommendations relate to individual, institutional, and planning capacities, I think there's quite important areas that I also want to pick up, is the importance of getting commitment from government to take up the recommendations. And here the role of the focal ministry has been quite important in trying to build that relationships with, for example, the Department of Higher Education and Training, to look at the particular type of uptake of the recommendations that emerge, because we recognize that not all of them can be taken up within the PAGE program of activity in South Africa. I think another point to raise also is the fact that the assessment was undertaken by a national institute, and which is supported by the National Environmental Skills Planning Forum in South Africa. And that is, I think, quite an important buy-in to have that, to build that sustainability and continuity for the outputs emerging from the assessment. So if we look at the particular recommendations, so this is very early days, the study is just about to come out. And we're hoping that the recommendations will inform and go forward to hopefully be taken up not only by PAGE but by other actors in the country. So some of the around individual capacities, the assessment identified actual key capacities that were lacking and that were needed within the country. It looked at institutional capacities by doing an assessment of what learning existed in South Africa, what green economy learning, and where this can be expanded, upscaled to much more integrated ways of delivering green economy learning. And that it also brought out particular gaps related to planning capacities, the fact that green economy planning and implementation required the need to look at problems and questions much more from an integrated way, that monitoring and evaluation systems needed to be more reflexive. So I think there are very particular recommendations that emerged from the learning assessment in South Africa. I think on the global level, so I think the three things that I really want to flag was the capacity building and the institutionalization that actually takes place through the process of doing the assessment. I thought that was quite interesting. The very important role of the interministerial coordination and having recommendations picked up by other institutions, by other development partners in the country. And I think the third area that was really interesting that emerged from the Green Economy Learning Assessment in South Africa has really been how this assessment has fed into the global PAGE products on learning for an inclusive green economy. And I think that was quite, again, I think the comment was made on outcome 2 as well, that the quality of the assessment and the quality of the inputs and the resources that goes into the assessment, I think was really good on the learning assessment, so much so that we've seen it actually feed into the global PAGE product. So I think I will leave it there if there's any particular questions, or if Amre just wants to perhaps add, because she's been quite involved in the process as well, please pitch in.
Thank you, Najma. This is very helpful. So I think you have provided a very good picture of how things are happening at the national level in South Africa. I think under this outcome level, there are things happening at the global level. So ILO has been organizing a Global Green Economy Academy. It's the second time we did it last year, which opens it up for learning and capacity building to the rest of the world. Not only PAGE countries, but any country can participate in that one. There are global learning forums, and UNITAR has been organizing those, and there was a very successful one in 2015. At the national level, there have been green economy academies. The most recent one was in Burkina Faso, where it was not only PAGE, but PEI and Switch Africa Green participating and delivering as one. So there are many examples where, at the global level, the capacity building is happening, national level capacity building is happening, and then there are regional forums. So in Latin America last year, in 2015, we did a regional academy. So these are all available options and tools and opportunities for PAGE countries and PAGE partners. Also, I think PAGE is offering thematic trainings. For example, on green economy assessment, there could be a special training, or green jobs assessment, for example, in Mongolia, or on specific tools like T21 modeling, how it can be done, and there is a whole capacity building portfolio around it. We'll probably come back to the questions on how these things create the impact, which we still haven't really figured out, especially in outcome 3, but we'll probably come back to that discussion as we are moving forward close to the end. In the last 15 minutes, I would like to invite Jose Pineda to present the Green Economy Progress Index under outcome 4. The outcome 4 is really about countries who have improved their knowledge base for advancing the green economy. So in terms of knowledge products, PAGE has been producing a number of knowledge products so far, and you may have seen many of those global training manuals or assessment manuals, as well as guidance notes. And the Green Economy Progress Index is one of those products, global products, that PAGE has supported. Why we chose to present this product? Because it links with the impact in a very nice way. With this product, you are able to measure if you have achieved your impact level or not, whether countries have put in place green economy principles in their national planning and economic policy tools or not. So Jose, over to you. You can present the JEPI in 5 to 7 minutes.
Excellent. Thank you, Assad. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can. Very loud and clear.
Okay, thanks. Well, I wanted to talk about our work on the Green Economy Progress Measurement Framework. And in particular, the main objective that we had when we created this project was to contribute to the measurement of progress in the implementation of the SDGs. In fact, we have been able to use indicators creating direct links to 12 out of the 17 SDGs. We wanted to create, measurement framework that it was useful for comparing efforts across countries in different areas important for inclusive green economy, but also we wanted to link directly to whatever is done at the country level. So we wanted a measurement instrument that is able also to tell us something about the achievement of national priorities. And I think that the most important contribution that this output is doing to outcome 4 is that we think that this will contribute to the creation of knowledge to the measurement of progress in key inclusive green economy indicators. And that is how we conceive that that could be connected to help to achieve outcome 4. So can we go to the next, please? Well, the main framework has 3 key components. The first component is what is called the Green Economic Progress Index. And it is an index that is mixing a variety of indicators that try to capture changes in current well-being. And that the whole idea is that we could make an assessment of current progress. But in order to have a better idea, we need to use also what is the second component, which is the dashboard of sustainability indicators. So at the same time, we want to measure the progress that we are doing, but we want to combine this with an assessment of how sustainable those changes are. And that's the third component of the measurement framework, which is an overall ranking that we use by comparing the performance of the GEP index with the dashboard indicators. And the overall ranking is captured by the combination of these 2 elements. Can we go to the next? This is just an illustration of the variety of indicators that we are using. In fact, these are 19 indicators, 13 indicators, which are represented on the little trees that you see there, are just capturing all the indicators that we use for the GEP index. And it's just reflecting the multidimensionality of inclusive green economy. So we have indicators related to resource efficiency, like material footprint, energy use, but also we have indicators related to inequalities, to education, to health. So we want to cover the broader aspect of the multidimensionality of the inclusive green economy. And the indicators that you see reflected on the continents are the dashboard of sustainability indicators that we use in the framework. Next one, please. This is just a very illustrative sample of countries, and these are all the PAGE countries for which we have the data. But this exercise was done for more than 100 countries. So we have a complete ranking for 100 countries with all of these indicators. But the whole point here is that when we create the overall ranking, we are comparing how is the progress with the GEP index, which is capturing current progress, with the progress achieved in each of the indicators. The final ranking of the country will be achieved by using the value in which the country did the worst. So it means that in order for a country to have a higher value in ranking, it has to have a balance between progress in current inclusive green economy, but also the sustainability of that progress in green economy. Can we go to the last one? So this is just to illustrate very briefly what this methodology is all about. One thing that I wanted to say about the global results is that this overall ranking shows that only 17 out of the 100 countries are making progress simultaneously in the index and in the dashboard. So these are the countries that are making progress in current inclusive green economy, but also within the sustainability within planetary boundaries. The rest of countries are presenting challenges, and I think that this kind of methodology could highlight where countries should put emphasis, where are the main challenges related to this, to each of the aspects of the inclusive green economy. Moving forward, I think that this product could also contribute to advance knowledge on inclusive green economy, at least in two areas. One is that we could further improve the cross-country comparison in additional areas that were not included now, as we advance in the measurement of some key indicators of inclusive green economy into the future. But also I think the flexibility of the methodology allows this to be tailored to any particular country so that we could adjust the choice of indicators and the areas that are covered in order to reflect better and closer the country's priorities. And that's why we have also linked these to our previous work at the country level. So I will stop here to give some time for discussion later.
Thank you, Jose. I think this is a very interesting and very useful tool. It will probably take us a little bit of time to digest all the information, because it seems like we have done a lot of work and it requires probably more discussion, but I think it's very interesting. It's very important that we take it forward at the country level to see how do we measure our impact. Possibly this could be one of the tools that can be used there. So before coming to the questions and answers, I would like to open the space for another outcome 4 level intervention, which is the PAGE Ministerial Conference, which Germany is hosting next year. This year in March. And this is happening at a time when Germany holds the presidency of the G20. So it's quite an important event that PAGE is organizing. So I would like to invite Invu for 2 or 3 minutes to give where we stand on the Berlin ministerial preparations.
Thank you, Assad. Hello, this is Invu from PAGE Secretariat. I just want to give a quick overview of the PAGE Ministerial Conference and where we are in the preparation stage. Right now, the title of the Ministerial Conference is Inclusive and Sustainable Economies, Powering the Sustainable Development Goals. We will be, within this conference, we'll be looking at how a number of themes such as green investment, sustainable lifestyles, and inclusive growth can help make our economies more sustainable and help achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and the nationally determined contributions. We are also focusing on policymaking in this conference, and we hope to enlighten policymakers or give suggestions as to how they can make their economies more sustainable in line with the approach. This conference will be joined by ministers and other high-level policymakers, as well as CEOs and representatives from civil societies and trade unions. And some of the sessions that are planned for this conference include a media debate that we hope will be televised internationally, as well as reflections on where we have come in the conference, as well as in our inclusive economy approach, as well as future projections, where our products like JetFi can also be introduced. We also plan to have a reception in a museum in Berlin at the Museum of Natural History, as well as we like to hold an exhibition and have an award ceremony in recognition of innovative green economy approaches around the world. We do have more information available in our official UN PAGE website, www.unpage.org at Conference 2017. Thank you.
Thank you, Invu. So here we come to the end of one part. If you have any questions or you would like to contribute to the debate, I think there is a possibility of raising your hand. I've been told that that works. There are a few questions that Ronald has put together, and I will invite probably different people to answer to them. Is there a governance structure for PAGE in Mongolia? So, Amray, can you very briefly tell us the governance structure for PAGE in Mongolia? Because I think that could be a model for other countries as well. How many ministries?
Yeah, thank you. So there is a PAGE technical committee which brings together, I think, 12 ministries now. It was just renewed after the elections. I must say, I mean, really nice. I think the technology was important, but where the strongest intergovernmental collaboration took place was actually at the work stream level. So, for example, we were working on green buildings, and there were definitely 3 or 4 ministries: Ministry of Urban Development and Construction, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Environment, for example, working together. And I think maybe also saying in South Africa, we have the centers really at the task team level, where the actual sharing and collaboration takes place, while the technical team is maybe providing more overall guidance. One thing I wanted to note, which might be of interest for the other countries as well, is it's a committee that has been particularly established for the PAGE project, which, you know, in terms of the sustainability, we are trying to see what to do, because it's linked to a project. So Mongolia, the project is ending this year, so what will come next? And we are looking into opportunities to have a mechanism that will exist beyond 2017. And there are several options we are looking into. I mean, it could be like a committee of more that has more kind of executive decision power. But if we look actually at the PAGE mandate, what we are actually looking now into is more like an advisory body that can also carry forward this kind of policy analysis and assessment function and can guide work in this area. So it's not necessarily a government body that takes decision like on financing, etc., but more like that carries forward the work that has been done under PAGE so far. And we're also trying to write up some lessons learned on that. So we should be able to share something with all of you over the next month.
Thank you, Emre. So I see that there are questions and there are discussion points about the governance, which can be helpful for everyone. I think there are a few follow-up questions, and I think it will be best that we provide written answers on that. For example, there is a question about coordination level, at what level, coordination is at what level, etc. I think it's we can write a Mongolia story on coordination and governance structures and possibly share with colleagues. And you had started already preparing that 2-pager, which has some reflection on this topic as well. I'm looking for if there are any other hands up or if there are any other questions. I see that there are quite a few questions on Green Economy Progress Index and its technicalities. For example, what is the scale of JEPI, whether all the sub-indicators are weighted equally or there is a weighted average, and how does it work? Are all what is the scale of JEPI, like +1 to -10, etc.? So these are the questions which I'm not sure if we should provide an answer now or we will provide an answer in writing. But if there are questions related to outputs and how they link to outcome and how they create impact, I think that is the real focus of today's discussion. How do we implement the theory of change? How do we understand it? We are very happy to see that from so many countries, we have so many participants who are actually part of the PAGE family. So if there are questions around theory of change and impact, outcome, and output level, I think we have a few more minutes for that. Okay, so yes, Emre.
I have a question, if I may. Wanted to ask you maybe if you can reflect a bit more. We know where we are now in organizing the PAGE Ministerial Conference, but again, what's the link with what you are your expectations in terms of the results and the impact we want to achieve?
Thank you, Amre. So right now we have it's been a while since, for example, we had we now have the SDGs and as well as the Paris Agreement, and it has also been a while since we've really worked on this interesting economy approach in our countries, as well as worldwide efforts on the same. So this conference really hope to link the inclusive economy as one viable one of the viable approaches to achieving the SDGs and the NDCs. So we approach this from a green investment angle. So how do we enable, for example, public finance as well as just domestic finance in general to help green investment in the fields and sectors that can really enable both the private sector as well as the general public in achieving the SDGs. Also, how do we lead a sustainable lifestyle, both from a consumption point of view as well as the production point of view? And how do we make sure that there are necessary policies that we can enable that kind of environment where we do live a sustainable lifestyle without necessarily leaving anybody behind and going for its full point. And there are obviously a number of challenges for policymakers that come up. For example, how do you make a transition from one government to the next and still hold on to your sustainable approaches that the previous government has created, but they may not be necessary for supporting the new one. So these are some of the tough questions we hope to answer.
Okay. Thank you, Ingus. So Jose, can I come back to you for a very short intervention, let's say, on 2 points. One is, what is the scale of Green Economy Progress Index, like from +1 to -10? And secondly, are all sub-indicators weighted equally? Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Actually, let me start with the second one. We have kind of an interesting weighting system in which we use the initial condition of each country compared to a relevant threshold of sustainability. So that gave an idea about how important is progress in each indicator and allowed us to do international comparison. So the GEP index is a weighted average of progress across the 13 indicators, but the weighting is country specific, and it depends on each indicator how is the initial condition of each country relative to a threshold of sustainability. The second is the range. Is not bounded because progress could be negative or positive, so we could expect something to improve, but actually we have regressed. But a good reference value is the value of 1. Why? Because since the index is just telling us how much progress we have with respect to desired target, 1 will mean that we achieve our objective. So when you see a value closer to 1, it means that the country is getting closer to the targets. When it's less than 1, it means that it has a progress, but is less than whatever initially was the target. And when it's negative, is that the country moved in the opposite direction. When it was supposed to be improving, actually move in the wrong direction. So I hope that clarifies a little bit. But we have a series of material, a document, a full document with all the technical results, just to be out of the print very soon. And we have also like a shorter version, which is a glossy, which will have more intuitive explanation of all the details about the index.
Thank you. So as we are moving to the last 3 minutes, I will take this opportunity basically to express my reflections of today's discussion. I find it very inspiring that, you know, these things are happening in 11 different countries in so many different continents, and I can see a lot of common threads in them. I see that this type of webinars are an opportunity for our mutual learning from one country to the other, as well as from, let's say, UN Secretariat to the colleagues who are working at the country level. And that is also an opportunity for South-South learning and South-South cooperation. The idea that is coming to me is that in PAGE, we have 11 countries who are partners from developing countries, but we have 8 countries who are partners from developed countries. And possibly we need to bring this learning between North and South. I think there is a lot that even now the developed countries can learn from developing countries on greening their economies. And I think our donors have been asking for this. So I will probably ask Ronald and Jamal to see if next time we can open it up to our funding partners so that they can also join this discussion and they can possibly benefit from things like Green Economy Progress Index and see how it can be applied there. One thing which we were not able to discuss today is our media and outreach activities. In some countries, we have done very well. I think in Peru, we have a communication specialist, at least on part-time basis, which is helping to communicate PAGE results to the rest of the world. We are trying some effort at the secretariat level. But when I hear these stories, success stories from so many different countries, I recall one comment from our funding partner who said that you are keeping PAGE success a secret. We need to tell the PAGE story probably more widely, and I would probably encourage each one of you in countries and as well as in international organizations to tell the PAGE story more frequently and probably more loudly. I think what PAGE is delivering is fairly unique. 5 agencies coming together, supporting one objective, which is transformation of economies to deliver on SDGs. And we need to tell that story more often. Number one, for many organizations and individuals and governments, just 5 agencies working together in such a cordial way is a unique achievement in itself. So I feel very inspired. I think we will meet we will meet again very soon, and probably take this discussion forward on how we create impact and how from that individual country level impact, we create a global impact. We will see one reflection of that possibly at the Berlin conference. So I would like to thank all of you for your participation. I would like to thank Jamal and Ronald for organizing this webinar without any technical hitch so far. So that's an achievement. So thank you so much. And I wish you all a very nice day or a very nice evening. Thank you.